Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? This is a video response to Bacon Gaming, I believe. This is a great name for a channel. But he had this video talking about his emerging roleplay model, I believe is the name. I will link the video in the description below. Go watch it. It's a good video. It really resonated with me in terms of a lot of the thoughts I was having, still have sometimes, the questions I was asking, that sort of thing. So I wanted to make a video response because it was really provocative to see somebody having these thoughts and then talking about this sort of stuff, and obviously putting a lot of deep thought into it. I would suggest watching the video because sometimes I'll just be addressing bacon and I might forget to say what I'm responding to. But in it, he talks a lot about the GNS model. And I figured, well, it's time, it's 2024. Let me go back to that model. Because, at some point he's talking about not necessarily finding it the most useful, but sort of useful and these kind of things. My own journey was that I really was highly, highly resistant to that particular model of gaming and, or thinking about game, about theory and all that sort of stuff. Because any sort of model and theory of gaming or anything else is an effort to describe and explain what's going on. And this isn't necessarily meant as a rebuttal or as an apology for that theory or adjacent theories, things like GNS, GDS, the big model, threefold model, all that kind of stuff. It's just my own experiences. So when I started, I think what flipped a switch for me, or what made it change my comprehension or change my perspective, is the right word, on how I was viewing that model and where it started to really jive with and reinforce my own experiences and observations, was when I started to think about the things presented in that model from a decision-making standpoint. It became really manifest to me that people were making decisions in role-playing games. And my friend Anthony talks about that's the primary thing that we're doing in role-playing games, is making decisions. But why we're making the decisions that we do, that varies. And it varies based upon what we tend to gravitate towards and why we're there in the first place, which is a lot of what Bacon was talking about. Bacon was talking about the idea of the ideas of gamism and simulationism and narrativism or drama being pillars. And I would say that it's a lot more helpful to use the language, at least in the big model. I forget if they used it prior to that, where they called them creative agendas. There's 3 creative agendas for play. What I find is even more helpful is the idea of calling them intentions. I can't recall if my friend Anthony necessarily calls those intentions, but there's been a lot of talk about intentions for play. So we'll go with intentions. What are you there for in the first place? What kind of experience do you want? It became manifest to me that various people were at the table playing role-playing games for different reasons. And these reasons did not always necessarily coincide. And the decisions that they were making, very often you're wondering, why is this person doing this? Why are they making this decision? Why are they harping on this? It's because the intention for play was different. And that intention, they had one that was in first place. They had a reason they were there. And that intention guided all of their decision-making processes, or was the most important thing. Not only that, but the design of certain games, either intentionally, like a lot of the work that the people in the Forge did, or unintentionally, tended to reinforce or enforce decision-making in a particular way, sometimes very, very prescriptive, and sometimes it just became obvious that if you try to make decisions in a different way, the game would fight you. And you wouldn't be terribly happy with the results. So you look at it that way. People, coming from a game perspective, where the game is a thing, and I believe that the language they use, the idea of step on up, really helps to understand that and to reinforce it. I know people that when they play a role-playing game, it is about the game. It is about the challenge. What that looks like may be incredibly different from person to person and from game to game. I believe that all of these intentions are on their own spectrums. and that what the manifestation of what that looks like can be very, very different, which makes this fascinating and also very confusing sometimes, is different intentions may masquerade as each other at first glance. And then you start to take a look, well, what's really happening here? Well, what the hell are you talking about, Ivan? I've noticed there are some games where it looks like on first glance, this game is about creating drama. It's about, creating, intentionally creating a story. It's about intentionally creating these, things. It looks like it's very narrative. It looks like it's very drama focused. However, the more you look at how the people that play that game play it, the more that you play it yourself, you look at the rules, the games tend to, and the people, some people tend to treat that as a game. Like there are mechanics in place, and if you game the mechanics, if you put yourself in certain positions, the right to direct the narrative, to say what's actually happening, in however that work, that manifests in the rules of the game, that can be a game in and of itself. And yes, creating that dramatic situation or whatever it happens to be can be fun, but you can watch the people wrest in control of the right to have that authority or responsibility to say what happens at this particular moment. That can be really, really interesting. Likewise, Bacon talked about this idea of games that, might, have a lot of resource management and are simulating, which is a term that gets misunderstood in the context of these models, simulating real life and simulating resource management and that sort of thing. But on closer examination, you start to see that the real world or imagined world situation or elements, some kind of resource management or whatever happens to be, these are acting as the currency or medium for playing a game. And it's really about the strategy. It's really about figuring out how to manage those resources or whatever it happens to be. And so you start to see those play styles really emerge, and certain games really, really are reinforcing that. Clearly there's a lot of other games, I don't need to mention all of them, that, where strategy is kind of the thing. And some people thrive in that environment, and that's what they want to do when they play a role-playing game. As far as narrativism, I agree with Bacon that I much prefer the term drama. The idea that there are many people where their decisions are based on the rule of cool. What would be appropriate to happen here? What would be thematically appropriate? What would be the most dramatic thing to happen here? How can we get these characters pointed at each other? How can we create an interesting situation? As a game master, because these decisions that we're making, we're not just making them as players, we're making them as game masters, which are also players in a different capacity. Why did these people just show up now? Why did the bad guy just show up? Why did these stairs collapse just now? For many people, they're making those decisions because of dramatic intent. The intentional creation of a story, or as my friend Anthony often says, the story as product. And this intention, at least from my perspective, lives across a huge spectrum. And we can see this manifested in various different ways. And externally, you can see people portraying their characters. You can see them demonstrating who these characters are. You can see people obviously talking completely out of character. Let's put these, it was very writer's room or very authorial. Very often people might tell you that they're really favoring a different intention. However, sometimes your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. And I'm not saying anybody is intentionally lying about their creative agenda or their intention. It took me a long time, and it took a lot of introspection, a lot of self-observation, and a lot of talking to other people to really kind of wrap my head around, well, what am I really getting out of these games, or what drives my decision-making process? And when my decision-making process is conflicted, why is it conflicted? Why do certain decisions I make feel bad? And why do certain decisions I make feel right? Because we can have warring motivations within ourselves. But anyhow, I'm getting ahead of myself, and I don't want to make the video too complex. Imagine me making a video complex. But there's various, I watch various people I know and people I don't know doing things and making decisions, and it all seems to fall under that umbrella of their intention is dramatic in some ways. It could be performative, whatever it happens to be. And many games are designed intentionally to support that. Certainly the games like Sorcerer and Troll Babe, they're very prescriptive. I think Sorcerer is even more prescriptive, where Ron Edwards will tell you flat out, you're not supposed to play this in a character stance or an actor stance. You're supposed to be playing this in the stance of an author. You're supposed to be going out of character and making decisions to create these dramatic situations, to create this sort of thing. It's the intentional creation of drama. And finally, simulationism. And, to me, I had the same misunderstanding that a lot of people do, and I think it's just a terrible term, to be honest. The right to dream is a much better explanation of what's actually going on. Simulationism is not about simulating physics or simulating every facet of a real world experience or every moment of a character's day or every piece of gear. That simulation of those particular things can occur in games involving the other creative agendas or intentions just as much as they can in a game involving simulationism. It's about simulating the experience of being that character in that imagined situation. As a game master, it can be about playing the NPCs as if they were real and playing the imagined situation as if it was real. Maybe you don't get to determine that these stairs collapse. The game has rules for that, so you roll the dice, and you're not sure what's going to happen. It's very much more about story as byproduct. We look back and we find out what actually happened. That happens in the Game of Agenda as well, but I think it's much more salient in this one. You're making decisions from the standpoint of the character, but you're not making decisions because they're tactically appropriate or because they're dramatically appropriate. And, you can start to see people make decisions for that reason. You can start to see games that are designed for those particular reasons. And so it becomes a useful model for observing your own behavior, for the behavior of other people, for noticing why certain play styles conflict and why sometimes you're trying to create a particular game experience and it's not working. The second part, and probably a more difficult part, but I don't think I'm going to spend as much time on it, is the idea of what the heck is role play. And, Bacon talks about this idea of role play being the central thing, and the idea of like gamism and drama and simulationism being more like the limiters on how role play is expressed, which is an interesting way to put it. I like that. The issue with role play and defining role play and defining what's a role-playing game and not a role-playing game. First, that ship has sailed. That ship sailed 50 years ago. The horse is out. It's had children and grandchildren. It probably has great-great-great-grandchildren. We can close that door. We can put the cork back in the genie bottle, and those suckers are out and they've had kids. We're never going to get those terms back. I suspect very highly that my definition of what a role-playing game really is and what role-playing really is very, very similar to Bacon's. However, those terms are no longer just ours. And in terms of what role-play looks like, it's been my experience over time that while I have my own definition of what role-playing is, and for me it's very much about the idea of putting myself in the shoes of that character, making the decisions that they would make. It's not necessarily performative. The external expression of that may be quite different than the person sitting next to me with the same intention. It's not necessarily, I may not display to you the internal life of that character. I might not display to you their decision-making process or even what it feels like to be that character. I might not even talk like them, but I'll make my decisions based on what if that was the case and the situation was real. And that to me, because, that's a definition of role-playing that I prefer because that's the intention I have. It helps to understand that there are other people that have no interest in that. And to them, role-playing is playing the role of this role in the party, this role in the, whatever it happens to be. If it's tactical, that sort of thing. You're playing the role of that person, and you may be somewhat in character, may be entirely out of character with no real effort. But for the activity they want, for the intention for play, for that creative agenda, which can be very gamist. That is still valid role playing because that is what role playing is to them. And likewise, for other people for whom the story is a thing, what role playing is to them it might be very performative. They might use the character as an instrument to create drama. They might, as an author or a writer's room person, never really get into character as such. Or it may be very thespianism, or thespianism? Thespian. It may be very thespian. And it may be very dramatic and flamboyant. But are they actually role-playing in the way that I do? No, but they're still role-playing because they're role-playing that character and demonstrating to you that way or even through improv and whatever happens to be, they're role-playing that character in a different manner, and it's to, in some way, shape, or form, create something interesting or dramatic or show something interesting or dramatic or whatever. So we really can't pin down what is role-playing to one thing and have that be the central column, because those intentions, those creative agendas will inform, and maybe they're limiters, maybe that's a good term, I'm not sure. It will inform what is role-playing in the first place. And that column, while it might look really solid, it's not so solid, and it's really multifaceted, and it gets quite interesting. So the longer that I've lived with that model, the more that I've my friends and I have tacked on certain things to it, or talked about various things besides that, and my friend Anthony in particular has all kinds of things that many things I'd love to talk about, but they're not really mine to talk about because some of them he hasn't said publicly, and is still messing with some of the nuances of it. Other things we've talked about quite a bit. It still has stood the test of time for me in terms of my experiences with myself, with the people I play with other people. So my experiences and observations have shown that these things tend to stand up. Why do people play in these different ways? It is my hypothesis, I don't know if I could call it a theory, that a lot of this is hardwired. A lot of this is genetic. What's my evidence is anecdotal at best, but they're good anecdotes. But I've watched a lot of people just naturally play in certain ways and gravitate towards certain things, regardless of what other people told them or whether they just picked up the books and never really got any instruction from anybody else. They gravitate towards certain modes or styles of play. Really, really interesting and fascinating stuff. I look forward to what Bacon has to say in the future. And, he'd asked for feedback, so this is a little bit of feedback. And I'd love to hear his feedback. And hopefully we get a discussion going. And man, that's a great channel name. Who doesn't love Bacon? I love Bacon. Have a good one, kids.